Hi, it's Scott Allen for The Raw, and today I want to talk about the scrummaging in the Wallabies match against England. The first thing I want to say about scrummaging is that whilst it's a highly technical area, it's also about attitude. And the way both teams got ready and set up for the second scrum of the match, which was England's first feed, told me a lot about the way each team was approaching the scrum. You'll see Tom Youngs is running into position. He wants to get set quickly. The rest of the English pack form up around him. They want to scrum. They're like kids in a lolly shop. The Wallabies, on the other hand, they don't look quite as keen. They're taking their time to get set up. Now, I know that the speed of the setup isn't going to determine the outcome of every scrum, but to me it says a lot about the attitude of each team. There's been lots of complaints from Wallaby fans that Vunipola was boring in or angling in on Alexander in most scrums, and that he was the one that should have been penalised, not Alexander. When you look at this image from the first scrum in the match, you can see that the ball hasn't been fed. Genny has still got it in his hands, but Vunipola is at 90 degrees to the touchline. Now surely that's a penalty against Vunipola, when in fact the referee awarded a free kick against the Wallabies. Well, things are never as simple as they seem, so let's go through a scrum by scrum analysis for all 17 scrums in the match, and I'll give you my opinion on what I saw happening in each scrum. In that first scrum of the match, you can see that Vunipola sets up fairly square, and when they set, it's actually Alexander that's angling across Vunipola, and it's the Wallabies that are then pinged for an early push before the ball was put in. Now, as I replay the clip, you'll see that the Wallabies shear the scrum to the left towards the touchline. Why would they do that? Well, it's a tactic that's used by teams all over the world. What you're trying to do is to take the tight head, Alexander, away from the loose head, Vunipola, so he's got nothing left to push on. When that happens, the loose head will follow the tight head across the scrum, and he will naturally turn sideways. Once he turns sideways, he loses all his power and his ability to push back and resist the force. And if the referee's not paying attention and looks down now and sees a prop in that position, he may well penalise them from angling across. You may remember the Wallabies using this same tactic in the second test against the Lions this year, but Craig Joubert, an experienced referee, was onto the Wallabies. He knew exactly what they were doing, and he kept penalising the Wallabies rather than Vunipola. What is clear is that the Wallabies were pushing before the ball was in, and they were correctly pinged for an early push. In the second scrum of the match, both teams were fairly square when they'd set, and then England get the ball to the back of the scrum quite quickly and hold it there for a second shove. You can see with the ball at the back, Vunipola and Alexander both pushing fairly straight. As England start their second shove, they're wheeling it through their tight head side, so driving powerfully through that side. And on the loose head side, Vunipola is coming up underneath Alexander. Alexander's then going to stand up under pressure and is penalised for that. Now, I know that the law book says teams are supposed to drive straight and flat in a scrum, but that's not what happens. And any team that goes into a scrum expecting the opposition to play by the rules is going to get towelled up. Teams use angles to disrupt you. They'll use an angle across you, and they'll use an angle to come up underneath you. The fundamental battle in a scrum is between the loose head trying to drive the tight head up, and the tight head who knows what the loose head's trying to do, trying to drive the tight head down and keep them there. A good tight head knows how to stop the loose head getting underneath them. They don't need to be appealing to the referee for help. As we look at the overhead of that scrum, you'll see that before the ball's put in, both props are fairly straight. And then once the ball's put in, they both start to angle. And as the scrum goes on, you'll see those angles get worse. The question is whether Alexander's angle is because he's driving to the left, or whether he's being driven that way by Vunipola, or whether he's following the wheel that the English are putting on through the tight head side. The reality is it's a combination of all three, and we can't tell from looking at a video, and the referee can't tell from standing next to the scrum exactly who was at fault. So it's a penalty that could have gone either way, but in those circumstances the dominant scrum's always going to be rewarded, and England were clearly dominant in this one. So I've got no problems with the referee's decision. In the third scrum of the match, both front rows start fairly square, and they remain so throughout the scrum. It's a good clean scrum from the Wallabies. They get the ball to the back quickly, and therefore they can play. No issue with the decision in that scrum. In the next scrum, you'll see Alexander again stand up, but he's not driven up by Vunipola this time. He angles across slightly towards the English hooker and then drives up. He should have been penalised for this, but the referee missed it and allowed play to go on. Although England got the ball back from the base of the scrum, it was then an unplayable ruck and another scrum was awarded. That new scrum became the fifth scrum of the match, and again it's Alexander that stands up. And again it's not Vunipola that drives him up. You'll see at the end of the clip that Vunipola's remained fairly flat. It's actually Alexander that comes up under the hooker's arm. The referee gets him this time and correctly penalises him for standing up. You're not going to get away with 2 in a row like that. In the next scrum, you'll see that as the team's set, Alexander goes straight to ground. He's got his knee down now, but he gets up before the ball's put on, so fair enough, play on. Then the scrum's fairly stable until the English get it to the back and start their second shove. Now there's a fair bit of movement, the Wallabies are under pressure, and it's Slipper that goes down on his knee, and that's what the Wallabies were penalised for. Yes, after this, both sides stand up, and maybe the English stood up first, but the first offence had been committed by Slipper, so I've got no problem with that decision. In the 7th scrum, the front rows start fairly straight. The Wallabies get the ball to the back and move it quickly, which as you'll see they needed to do. There's the front rows fairly straight, but then the English wheel through their tight head side and the Australian loose head side is under massive pressure, so the Wallabies needed to move that ball on quickly. In the 8th scrum of the match, both front rows start fairly square, and then the English will wheel through their tight head side. I think the difference in this scrum is that Vunipola then angles and drives on Alexander rather than following the wheel. So in this one I think a penalty against England would have been justified, even though the Wallabies won the scrum. In the 9th scrum of the match, the Wallabies are a lot more competitive. They actually put some pressure on England this time, but it's a clean win for England, no need for the referee to be involved. In the next scrum, a free kick's awarded against the Wallabies for packing early. I'll let you listen to the audio and be the judge yourself.
See if he watches him.
Bind!
You're either early or you're not. It was pretty clear to me that the Wallabies are early, even though it wasn't by a great margin. The 11th scrum of the match is a good clean scrum win by the Wallabies. I'd like to see more of these where the referee has no opportunity to be involved. Likewise, scrum 12 was a good one for the Wallabies. I would like them to control the ball at the back a little better though. Now I showed you earlier the Wallabies driving before the ball's put in and shearing the scrum to the left. That's exactly what they do again in this scrum. By rights, they could have been penalised for that, but the referee allows play on. You do have to question what Ben McCalman was doing at the back of that scrum as it was driving forward though. Scrum 14's got a number of elements in it. The first is that Cole goes to ground, he slips, he's now in a really weak position, and by rights the scrum should have been reset so there could be a fair contest. But the referee allows the scrum to play on, and Robinson takes advantage. Cole can't resist, but Robinson drives on the angle, and by rights he should have been penalised as Vunipola should have been earlier. In the 15th scrum, you'll see that the scrum wheels really quickly and around the same point. It doesn't go forward or backwards, just straight around, and when that happens, it's normally the defensive team that's penalised. When we look at the overhead, it's pretty clear that on the loose head side for the Wallabies, there's never a real contest. It just goes backwards, which causes the scrum to spin straight away. So whether it's a deliberate wheel or whether it's not taking the weight, I agree it was a penalty to England. The 16th scrum of the match, the Wallabies were under a fair bit of pressure and going backwards, but the scrum was straight and was a fair contest. And in the 17th and final scrum of the match, you'll see that the tight head side for the Wallabies was absolutely crushed. Hooper's come off early, obviously looking to try and keep the ball in play after the full-time siren, but that side of the scrum was absolutely destroyed, clearly a penalty to England. So of the decision in 17 scrums, I agree with 12. There were two where it could have possibly gone the other way, one of those to England, one to the Wallabies, and there are three that I disagree with. But two of those, the penalty should have gone to England, only one to Australia. From a refereeing point of view, the Wallabies didn't fare too badly, but the same can't be said of their scrummaging performance.